Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
So it's Ron Crabtree here, back with another episode of MetaPod, where we talk about the three common challenges the organization, particularly North America, involved with tangible goods that they face with respect to digitization, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, which is not going away. That's a big problem for everybody, but particularly in manufacturing tangible goods. As you know, the policy changes of bringing more manufacturing jobs into the United States, North America, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Then finally, just the pressure to do more with less, less people, resources, facilities, logistics, and all these other sorts of things. So thank you for joining me. And with me today is Tia Rivera, and she has, she'll tell you about her in a moment, but she's got some very interesting perspectives from a workforce development perspective that really takes us back to that forever labor shortage challenge. And what are the key things organizations should be thinking about? So you'll really enjoy this episode if you feel like, feeling if this labor shortage is really affecting your growth or your quality opportunities. Maybe you really don't have a good strategy for talent and you're just kind of putting job postings out there. Or maybe you see it as somebody else's job to worry about that, when in fact it's leaders, it's all of our job to worry about that. You don't have any idea what that talent pipeline ecosystem might even mean to your organization. You know you need to build some capabilities, but you're just not sure quite where to start. And I think Tia is going to give us some great insights to some secret sauce here. So with that, Tia, tell us a little bit about you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, my name is Tia Rivera. Like you said, I'm the senior manager of the workforce development team for Boeing, the commercial side of the house. So my team is responsible for building manufacturing pipelines by partnering with our high schools, community technical colleges, military training organizations, et cetera, and really ensuring that they are teaching the right skills that we are looking for, not only from a Boeing perspective, but from a manufacturing sector perspective, really driving to ensure that the ecosystem exists so that when we all need the talent, we can all tap into it. And you know, we've done everything from that pipeline development piece from the external perspective. We are also driving that internal pipeline development as well. So ensuring that there are clear pathways into the company from those talent pipelines that you build, right? Ensuring that our internal partners are aware of the talent pipelines and are willing to use them. And then where it's appropriate, how do we build that internal candidate pool and then upskill them into kind of those harder to find positions?
I don't suppose, what you're working on is intended just for Boeing. I would imagine you want to push this upstream into the Boeing supply community because I'm imagining they have the same challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the suppliers, right? It's multi-sector. So we are partnered with our construction partners, right? Maritime, manufacturing, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, any of the sectors that have similar skills. And we actually created a core curriculum around those foundational skills that are across all of those sectors. And then a secondary piece of that curriculum that aligns for those individual pathways.
Perfect. Well, with that, let's get into the first part of the podcast. And we're going to start with a diagnostic. I've asked you to prepare some ideas around no matter what you're doing, but certainly they're in the aircraft industry and aerospace. But what are three key areas we should be looking at and examining to determine what's the nature of the challenge? How big is it? How can we measure that? If I don't know anything about workforce development, I'm going to walk down the hall and talk with folks. What are the questions I should be asking to determine we have a gap or a real opportunity? Share with us a little bit of the secret sauce here, things you've learned through your work. And what are key things, at least three key things we should look at? And why do we look at them? How do we look at them?
Yeah, let's kick off with the first one here, right? You really just need to identify what your current approach is, just to talent in general, right? Is it reactive or is it strategic? Are you just posting and praying, which is, a lot of what the strategy has been for years and years and years in the space, right? And we're really having to show up differently in that space now, especially with this forever labor shortage, as you're calling it, right? So are you really ensuring that you've got that sustainable workforce strategy in place, or is it more tactical? What is it that you're looking for right now? But you also kind of have to think about the future piece there. So you have to ask yourself, are you struggling to find the right candidates with the right skills? Are you seeing a high turnover in those key roles that you absolutely need, right? Do you have strong mutually beneficial partnerships with your academic partners if you're connected? Have the high schools, the community colleges, the military career skills programs, right? Or are you just showing up and plucking a few folks at a career fair, right? Is that really a full blown strategy, or again, is it kind of tactical and in that moment, right? And then, if you're working with the schools, are you actually hiring from them in any sort of effective way? If you're going and sitting on these advisory boards and you're talking to them about how they should shift their curriculum and potentially align to what it is that you're looking for, are you doing the work internally to ensure that you are actually hiring from that program? We had one of our community technical college partners that we had been partnered with for many, many, many years. And somebody outside of my organization went and partnered. They built a program specifically for a critical skill at Boeing. And we talked to the program. This was a few years after it was built, and they were so upset because they had put in time, energy, money, effort, right? They had brought on a brand new instructor to stand up this program. And they did all of that. And we hadn't figured out how to truly hire from the program. You can see how that could be poor partnership, right? And it really poorly affected or negatively affected our ability to continue to build other talent pipelines from that program. So again, you really have to drive back to, are you truly thinking about what those partnerships or how those partnerships add value on both sides of the table, not just from the industry perspective?
Okay. That's pretty cool. You gave us kind of a good envelope, right? Lots of different little pieces there. Let's get into a bit of specificity now. Now, I think you have three different deeper dives you wanted to make. I think the first one's around misalignment between the job requirements and the training. Maybe you could help our audience understand what are we looking for there and how do we determine if we have a gap, how big that gap might be. Can you share some of your insights there?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. So that misalignment between the job requirements and training, right, is really about, did you build the program based off of your actual skill needs, right? Number one, misaligned pipelines don't produce the talent that anybody is going to hire, right? And like we just talked about in the previous example, right? If a program is stood up and they're not hired from, that's not of value. So we really want to make sure that we are able to very clearly identify what it is that an industry partner truly needs, an academic partner or a military training organization to be able to teach. And that means that we have to get really clear about what it is that we need from a competency and proficiency level perspective. And you have to be able to speak in external language about it. At least at Boeing, right? We've got our own jargon. It's incredibly complicated to understand what it is. We have to simplify it and we have to standardize it to be able to speak it externally and do that effectively. So, from the industry perspective, right, you really have to understand what is it that you need an academic program to truly be teaching. And that means that you have to drive to clarity around your competencies, your proficiency levels. Your skill matrix has to be in place and you have to have a standard language to be able to talk about it. If you don't know what it is that you need that program to teach, then you should not be giving them input, which just, you have to be very, very clear about that, right? So you have to get clear and ask yourself some questions, right? Are your training partners teaching what's actually being used on the floor? Are the right people giving input on the curriculum? A lot of the time, it just happens to be somebody who's interested in being in the academic space or has a little bit of a passion around this, and that's great. But that doesn't mean that they are the right person, right subject matter expert to be able to give input on that curriculum, right? And you have to think about, should you be giving input on a curriculum from only one person's perspective? Yes, they might be representing your company, but is that a holistic perspective from the entirety of your company? At Boeing, you have multiple sites. Job roles do different things. at each site. It might be named the same job role, but you have to bring all those subject matter experts together, really ensure that you, again, drive to that standardization, right? What is it that we do as a core piece to this job role across all the sites? And that's how you give that feedback to the schools. You need to understand if the job roles have been updated per the new tools, automation or digitization, right? Have to make sure that you're driving to not only the reality of the job role right now, but also what it's going to look like in the future. And vice versa, right? If you're only driving to this idea of what you think the job is going to be in the future, and it's not the reality of what it is, now you've pushed the academic program to be too far ahead of where industry is. So you just have to be very careful about how you give that input there. Um,
Yeah, I'd like to interrupt with a question then. You said something really important there a little while back. You mentioned skills matrix. And I think that's a really important artifact that you may want to expound on a little bit for the audience here. What are we looking for? So I call it a versatility matrix. It's an old technique, kind of learned as part of the lean manufacturing craze. Is how do you create that grid right down the left side? We kind of all of our people or the particular roles. Across the top, you have different groups of skill sets. But then at the intersection of those is, do they need to know it or not? At what level for that role? That's a piece of it, right? So what level of mastery of that particular thing is needed at that role level? The other piece is, where are they against that? Have they been trained? There's multiple purposes to it, right? So there's
yeah.
design of and including with respect to a position description, what's expected from a training development perspective, and then a way to track their progress toward it, right? So it's a way to incentivize people to, grow into future jobs. If they're looking at my future job, they can look out and actually self-motivate to develop themselves.
Yes.
The other thing you said that was crucial there is you've got current state, but then you should be saying, okay, what's that look like in 3 years or
Mhm.
five with all, digital transformation being at forefront? Let's just talk about, skills of using technologies. It's going to become more and more important. So it's almost like, yeah, this is what we need to be doing today to be successful, but in the future, it won't be the same. So what's our development
Right.
plan to move current employees toward that? It, do you have an artifact? I mean, what should we be looking for in an artifact? What could that look like in your mind? In other words, I want to see the evidence that we've actually done the exercise. What are we looking for?
Yeah, the artifact itself can come in a multitude of ways, right? You could have a very simple one. It could be even as simple as like an Excel sheet, right? But what it's not is your basic job descriptions. It's not what you're writing up for a job posting, right? So many times folks say, "Oh, yeah, we've got that. No worries. We can totally explain what the job role is," right? But when you dig in one level deeper, and you talk about, okay, do you need this specific skill on day one or day zero before training, right? Let's look at it from this very specific lens because that's what we're doing, right? We're building a talent pipeline from the external to day zero before onboarding and training. So, from that perspective, what are the competencies? What are the proficiency levels? And what's the true expectation, and again, can be documented in a ton of different ways. The more flexible and kind of real time updates that a system has, the better for your skills matrix. But well, we're a big company, Boeing. We started with an Excel sheet, right? Obviously, it has shifted, it has grown, it's developed, but that's what you need to have, right? And then you need to be able to share it with an external audience. It can't just be a whole bunch of intellectual property, IP. You have to ensure that it's built for the correct audiences. And again, driving to that very simple and standard language. And that's the piece that you need to be able to explore.
Perfect. So that was pretty good, for that first of the three diagnostics. So we're ready to move to the second one, which I think was something
Yeah.
around under leveraging our current talent.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to get really clear about which jobs should you be pipelining from an external talent pipeline perspective, and which jobs do you need to create kind of an internal candidate pool for, and then ensure that you are upskilling them internally, right? And that's for a couple of reasons, right? But the biggest one is your existing employees are a gold mine for retention and for skills growth. You have to ensure that people see the opportunity for upskilling. Otherwise, they will not want to stay with your company.
All right.
They don't have to stay with your company, right? But you have to have the clear pathways for them so they can make that decision truly and effectively. If it is just chaos and they don't know, then they leave, right? So, really making sure that you've got those formal upskilling pathways and that you've got a couple of success factors, right? You have to really make sure that you've got a career navigator, right? You have to make sure that people feel supported as they are upskilled. For us, we actually implemented what's called the mechatronics job role, right? That mechatronics technician is a mid-level entry point that we created an external talent pipeline for. So we've got, I think it's 11 schools in Washington State that are all mechatronics aligned, right? We pipelined those folks into that and mid-level mechatronics job role, and now, you know, 30% of our internal promotions to our higher graded maintenance mechanics roles come from that internal candidate pool in particular. And they are upskilling in half the time as a normal candidate, right? So you can see that we've created value for ourselves from a company perspective, but also value for those individuals who have taken this entire pipeline pathway.
All right. So how do we kind of measure that? If I'm assessing our readiness, I think you had several bullets here, like, show me the plan, right? What is the written plan? And what were the other things you had? What are we going to look at and measure and try to lay our hands on to assess our opportunity here? You had a few other things I think here.
Yeah. Number one, you have to identify, what are your barriers? What's preventing the internal mobility, right? Are there certifications that are required? Are there policies, or is there a cost barrier? Time, right? If it's going to take 5 years to upskill somebody, does that make sense, right? But if you have the opportunity and you can kind of see, okay, look, we've only got a small gap in skill set here. We can figure out how to fill that internally. We've got a strong enough training system to go ahead and do that. Then that's the right pathway. But it has to be truly feasible and it has to be functional, even from an employee perspective, right? And I think sometimes when we are developing training pathways, we get very convoluted. It gets very big, very fast. So really keeping all of that in mind and then ensuring that you've got that success factor of having the supporting folks that really help these folks move through and create an individualized training pathway. Uh, Toyota has a model that is based off of these career navigators, and it is so functional for them, right? Those candidates, they come in, they know exactly where they're going to land. They have an individualized training pathway. They're upskilling, they're on their way. And I've never heard a negative word about the program ever, right?
Yeah, you said something important there. One of my guests was Alan Willett. He talked about the wisdom gap, and his big focus is around, engineering and new product development and, developing the engineers of the future has been one of his sweet spots. One of the things he said I thought was really important is, there has to be a conscious mentorship program.
Yes.
So we should be looking for where's the list that tells me for every single employee who their mentor actually is? That would be
Yeah,
an artifact I'd be looking for, right?
absolutely. Who the mentor is, how to mentor, right? And how you build some standardization around that. I think so often we think about coaching and mentoring as just kind of this, thing that people can kind of do. It's like a natural leader, a natural mentor, right? And it's, oh, we don't have natural leaders or natural mentors. Some people are okay with developing some of that on their own, but you have to have standards around it and you have to have a culture that incentivizes it. And that piece really is the force multiplier.
Perfect. So I think that'll get us to the third thing that you advocate you better look at and understand your vulnerability or opportunity is around sustainment of talent pipelines and industry partnerships. You mentioned this earlier, so this should go fairly quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So I think a lot of companies take workforce development partnerships as short-term solutions to fill an immediate need, rather than kind of the long-term investment to ensure a skilled labor pool is available when we all need it, right? So there's really a lack of shared ownership and cross-industry collaboration to maintain these pipelines, especially between hiring cycles. So again, we all need those similar foundational skills, whether it's for maintenance, mechatronics, foundational assembly skills, right? Doesn't really matter. But we're not all hiring at the same time. So if companies aren't willing to share the load in, sustaining these talent pipelines and keeping them warm, then we risk showing up after the pipeline has truly dried up. So we need to figure out how to get creative here, right? So for example, if company X is hiring military personnel with manufacturing or into manufacturing jobs, right? And company Y is hiring more of the military connected personnel, so the spouses and the children. And they both need to incentivize those folks to come to the same state, right? Don't you think that it would be of value for those two companies to partner together and say, hey, spouse or, military personnel, right? Hey, we've got a job for you. And by the way, we're partnering over here to make sure that your partner also has a job so that you can come with dual income to this state. That's a value, right? And that's value for everybody involved.
Yeah, this is going good. Interesting. So I think some of your assessment questions, that we want to go ask the question, can we show the evidence and the artifacts to prove we are or are not effectively, right, engaging the training partners, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we really collaborating with our peer companies, even our competitors in some cases, and knowing which programs and partnerships have some risk associated with them? So this is really good stuff. So let's pretend that the audience is going, oh, yeah, we have a burning platform. Yes, in fact, we could definitely get better at that. Tia, let's pivot now. We're really interested in how do you do it? All right. What's your sage advice based on your experiences around what do you do to get out in front of these as quickly as you can as an organization? What's your advice there?
Again, make sure you know what skills and proficiency levels you're truly looking for and be able to explain them in detail to an external audience, right? That's your first and your foremost. If you don't know what you've got or what you need, you can't figure out how to get it from an external perspective. You're going to partner directly with your education, and training providers. You're going to offer access to subject matter experts, sites, and equipment, anything that you can provide to support those programs as it aligns to those skills that you truly need, not just random stuff, right? And then you're going to translate complexity. You're going to work with your technical SMEs internally to break down the complex tasks that are really trainable competencies and those proficiency levels. And remember, don't recreate the wheel. Go find out what already exists and leverage it. When go deeper than surface level, just because a program is not named aerospace doesn't mean that it doesn't align to aerospace, right? Just because a machining program is named machining also doesn't mean that it hits your machining requirements. So you just have to do one extra step there and really figure out that alignment piece.
Now, before we go on to it, I'm sorry, I got to interrupt with a question because it said some really important things here and something popped into my head. What's been your experience and your advice around, this stuff isn't free either, right? It takes time and money to stand this stuff up. Have you had success with finding funding that doesn't have to be put up by Boeing, for example, like, state, local governments, et cetera? I mean, have you had success there? What would you tell the audience around what they should look at to help fund some of this? I mean, it kind of ties right into this. Somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah, you're talking about a public-private partnership, a P3, right? This is really important. You have to get creative and work with your government operations teams, right? You have to work with the state. It could also be federal level funding. There's a ton of funding out there for apprenticeship pathways right now, right? But also work studies, etc. Military career skills programs. You have to get creative about how you're going to bring these partners together, but we've been very successful with our Core Plus Aerospace curriculum. So the core curriculum was developed again across aerospace, maritime, and construction. This is about 10 or 11 years ago now. And, Boeing put up 700,000 for initial curriculum development, in partnership with our, in-state apprenticeship partners. And then, the state provides 900,000 annually just to the aerospace piece, more for maritime and more for construction for new new core plus aerospace programs to stand up, right? For their sustainment, maintaining their reusable materials, equipment, etc. And so there's real opportunity out there, and there's real money for it. You just again have to get very clear about what it is that your need truly is. Um, and honestly, you don't have to go and create your own curriculum, right? You can use the existing framework that works. You should partner with the existing career technical education programs. Get clear about how you can help them understand their skills, translate to your needs, and then go find funding to help them, be supported in that.
Cool. Let's keep pressing on. What's the next sage advice you might offer?
Yes. So map your mobility pathways, right? Define your clear.
So
Yeah.
define mobility pathway, just so there's no confusion what you mean by that.
Yeah, your upskilling pathways, right? You bring somebody in, how are they going to move around the company? And it doesn't always have to be up, right? You can always create lateral pathways. People want to move. People want to have the opportunity to learn new skills and be valued in different ways. So really making sure that it's clear. If the US military can do it, we should can. You know what I mean?
I do.
So really again, entry level to critical roles, what are the timelines? What are the expectations? How are you going to sit down and have a conversation with somebody in their performance management review and say, yeah, we think that you hit this, this, and this, but maybe you have opportunity to grow here, here, and here. And this is how we're going to create that development pathway so that you can get to where you want to be. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So anything else around, let's see here, that would have been the second theme was around, under leveraging internal talent, having a path. Anything else for that part before we move on to the final?
Um, Reframe your ROI, right? It's really hard to kind of go into your uh to your leadership and you say, "Oh, well, I want to start this workforce development team," and you're not going to see the ROI for the next 10 years, right? Because it takes forever to develop a talent pipeline. But it's showcasing the success stories and the metrics that prove the internal upskilling supports retention, your culture goals, and your cost control, right? It's about the retention piece. It's about ensuring that your company is, on par with what other companies are able to provide or doing better because so many of us have forgotten to do this piece and do it well.
Very good. So let's get down into that third area then. I think that third area you had talked about was, sustainment of the talent pipelines, industry partnerships. Anything else we ought to do, assuming that's an opportunity?
We'll talk to the other industry partners, right? Leverage what it is that they are doing. The big whales like Boeing, we have workforce development teams. We've got a dedicated team that is responsible for this. And it doesn't work for us and it doesn't work for you unless we are partnered in that space. So you have to leverage what the other companies are doing. The way that you provide value as a small or medium sized company, right, is by providing internships, teacher training, or just clear opportunities and pathways to hire, right? It's saying, hey, all these students in these talent pipelines, you've got awesome skills for across the industry sector.
Very good. Awesome. Anything else from an advice perspective before I have a note, one more thing I was going to say, but I didn't want to interrupt. Anything else around advice? Okay.
I
Okay.
think we got it.
All right. This has been terrific. As it happens, we are working on forever labor shortage, a survey baselining and then benchmarking basis. We've been doing that with our internal community of meta experts. We had a couple of hundred of them weigh in with their opinions around. We think about there's like 9 different buckets of things we need to do to fight the forever labor shortage problem. And what you've done is really drill very deeply into one of those bigger strategies. There's actually a bunch of others. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at that survey here in not too distant future. But I think there's some opportunity to share benchmarking. And would you be open to conversations with folks in the future around what they're doing and benchmark a little bit with what you guys have been doing at Boeing?
Absolutely. We do that all the time. We're more than happy to share. Again, really phenomenal opportunity just to see, how we can leverage what's already been done and identify new ways of partnership.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, this has been fantastic. We'll get into wrap up now. So, if folks kind of like what they've heard, they want to talk to you, learn more about some of your ideas, some of your experiences, collaborate, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. Feel free to have them connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty unique name. You introduced me as Tia, but my full name is Essentia, spelled just like essential without the L. And Rivera is just river with an A at the end.
Very good. Tia, thanks for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
All right. Well, we really hope you enjoyed this episode of MetaPod. Be sure to like it. Be sure to share it with your friends. More listeners allows us to continue to do this free service to the business community. Focus on North America, but basically everybody in the world can benefit what we're learning here. So thank you again.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.